Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting us to Malaysia today. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm really sorry I cannot be here in person today. As you know, the timing of the program changed a little bit. But today, Matthew Claudel, one of the key people at our lab, both in Boston and Singapore, will be here to share some of the things that we do, some of the experiments we do. And I just want to give you a little bit of introduction, an introduction of what Sensible City Lab does. We're around 30 people in Boston and 10 people in Singapore, and we're really passionate about how our cities are changing and how digital information can provide a new way in order to understand better our cities, design them better, and ultimately change the way we live in them. And if you think about it, all these technologies that change our life for the past 10, 15, 20 years, about navigating space, the way we meet each other, the way we get access to knowledge, the way we work, the way we do things on the way in a way that we couldn't just a few years ago. Well, all of this now is this technology, atomized, network dispersed, is entering urban space. And some people call this field smart cities. We prefer to call it sensible cities. We think the sensible city puts people at the center more than technology, and that's really what we try to explore every day at our labs. Now, but instead of telling you much more about this with words, I think the best thing would be to look at some of the projects that give you a tangible sense of some of the issues we're looking at, and that's why I would like to invite Matthew to come here and present, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.
As Carlo mentioned, I'm joining you here from the Sensible City Lab. And you probably noticed that sensible is spelled a little strangely and the typography is a little strange. And in fact, this is one of the great frustrations of working at the Sensible City Lab. Every time you type in the name, the computer autocorrects from sensible to sensible, and it does so automatically. I'm not just complaining or making a joke about this. It's actually an interesting example of something called ambient intelligence. Think of this as invisible computing. Technology is doing something in the background, hopefully without you ever noticing. And this is actually pointing towards a larger trend in technology today. In the evolution of digital devices, technology is actually disappearing. As it seeps into every part of our everyday lives, from eating to traveling to mowing the lawn, you see technology less and less. And this is a culmination of what technology has meant in the past. It's kind of an evolution. So in the past 50 years, we've gone from huge mainframe computers that took up an entire room, to desktop computers, to laptops, to mobile phones, and today we're seeing wearable computers. So really, this is kind of the technology disappearing, it's slipping into the background. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We're going to look specifically at how this has happened in urban space. During the 1990s, this is what people thought would happen to cities. It's kind of this shimmering techno future where place, what we're discussing here today, becomes kind of irrelevant. This guy is speeding through a landscape that really doesn't matter. What's at the foreground is the technology. A popular book called The Death of Distance put forward a similar idea. The concept was that trains, cars, eventually TV, were making something like place completely irrelevant. Space and place were kind of lost in a new digital world. When you could be instantly digitally connected, the relevance of one place versus another is not there anymore. People thought that cities, as condensers of physical proximity, were actually a vestige of the industrial era. There was this kind of iconic quote about the death of cities. And this guy, George Gilder, poor George Gilder, is quoted in every single one of Carlo Ratti's presentations because he was really wrong. What we're seeing today is that cities are more relevant than ever. This is a photo of Tianjin in China, and it's just one of the many cities that's popping up today in the phenomenon of instant urbanization. Humanity is urbanizing at this incredible rate. And in the past few years, we've actually tipped past the 50% mark. So today, over 50% of humans live in cities. At the same time, cities account for 75% of energy consumption and 80% of global CO2 emissions. So cities are a tremendous challenge. They're something we really have to consider, but they're also a terrific opportunity. And those opportunities are what we're focusing on at the Sensible City Lab. So how are we doing it? As I mentioned before, technology today is becoming atomized. It's becoming smaller, lighter, more transparent, more invisible, and it's entering every part of our environment. It's kind of this digital blanket that's coming over our cities where humans are in between. Think of it this way. I don't have Carlo's Italian accent, but he describes the Ferrari, the Formula One car, as this example of the ubiquitous computing phenomenon, where before you had, if you had a Formula One car, you would bet on the best driver and the best car, and you would win the race. Today, what's happening is there's ubiquitous sensors that are embedded in the car, and they're sensing in real time everything that happens with the car, and they're beaming it back to a team who's actually responding to that information in real time. So the car is acting and it's monitoring itself. And we're calling this sensing and actuating. And the exciting thing is that that's happening in the space of the city. Sorry, we're just going to stick on this slide. At Sensible City Lab, we're looking at kind of 10 dimensions of cities and looking at how those 10 dimensions will transform the city in the future. But most importantly, how those 10 dimensions will transform people's lives in the space of the city. So the first dimension is public participation 2.0. We're all familiar with images like this one from the Arab Spring. And the events that happened during the Arab Spring wouldn't have really been the same if it weren't for these technologies that I'm talking about. They allowed people to come together in ways that they never could have, to communicate immediately through things like Foursquare, through things like Twitter and Facebook. Could we imagine a similar technology that allowed people to come together around their cities and actually have an active role in shaping their cities? This is a group called the New Urban Mechanics. They're based in Boston. And what they're doing is creating apps, or allowing citizens to create apps to come together and kind of identify challenges in the city, but not only that, to come together and respond to those challenges in the city. I'm going to show you another video that we made. This project was looking at borders in the United Kingdom. So there's the traditional kind of global geopolitical borders, but we were looking at borders that were more human, more subjective. And we took telecommunication data, this incredibly vast data set. You know, almost everyone has a phone and everyone's connecting with everyone else. And we identified regions that emerged when you look at those connections. You can see here kind of as they pile on top of one another. And then here we're identifying these nodes or regions that are sort of communicating with one another more actively. And what we noticed is that kind of distinct areas emerge. So ones that you would expect, for example, Scotland is kind of talking to itself. But there's other ones that you would never have imagined. So we were thinking that this could become kind of a new human way of forming borders that has nothing to do with history, nothing to do with politics, but everything to do with humans and how they communicate. The next one I want to talk about is smartphone, smart city. And smartphones are a really exciting dimension of the research we're doing because almost everyone has this, and it's kind of a computer that everyone's carrying with them at all times in the city. So smartphones are allowing us to, you know, book a dinner. You can immediately see what restaurants have a table, what you might be most interested in, what your friends are recommending. They're allowing you to call a taxi. This is Uber, which is a new app that's being rolled out in cities, which kind of allows you to have a taxi at all times. And this is also pointing towards a project that we're doing in Singapore. Again, I'll show a video. So in Singapore, we have access to this incredibly rich amount of data, data that includes cell phones, transportation, shipping. Here, for example, we're looking at how people are talking to each other. This is with Singtel cell phone data. Here we're looking at how energy is consumed in response to specific heat. So people are turning on their air conditioning units and using a lot more energy in certain parts of the city. Here we're looking at special events. So this is the Formula 1 race and how people are texting during the race, and you can kind of draw new maps of the city. And this one's really interesting. It shows areas where it's raining and how people correspondingly call taxis more frequently in those areas. And this leads to kind of new apps. So, how can we build an app that allows taxi drivers to respond to weather conditions in a more effective way? Here we're showing how the island itself stretches based on how long it takes you to get from one location to another. And here we're looking at Singapore as a node in kind of the global shipping and travel landscape. So kind of all the connections that are coming in and out of Singapore. Third is a city where everything talks. Right now we know everything about the production and the supply chain. For example, here we're using an app to kind of track where this product is coming from. This computer, for example, is made from components that are from all over the world. It's assembled in different stages and shipped from one place to another, going through all those stages. And we really have a very accurate picture of production and supply. We asked ourselves, why don't we know about the removal chain? So this is a project called Trash Track, where we started looking at what happens to things after you throw them out. And could we draw actually just as accurate of a map of our trash as we do of our products? So we developed these tags. They're a little bit like mini cell phones, and they geolocate. And we asked about 500 people in Seattle to tag 3,000 pieces of trash. And I'll show you a video of. So here you see this could be anything from cans to banana peels. So essentially we attach these tags to pieces of trash. And we sort of sat back and watched what happened over the next 2 weeks, and or actually 2 months. And what we found was really surprising, that this trash gets shipped all over the United States, and sometimes in crazy ways. So there was one piece that goes from Seattle to Chicago, back down to California, and it shows that this removal chain is actually very complex and very inefficient. So given this knowledge that your trash is a lot of energy is being wasted on your trash to bring it all over the country, there's 3 responses. Firstly, the response of an engineer. The engineer says, okay, you've given me this data, I can kind of create a new system and make it much more efficient. The second one is to share the information with people. So you show people how inefficient the system is, and they actually change their behavior correspondingly. So after this project, we had a person come to us and say, look, every day I used to use bottles of water. I used to kind of drink them and just throw them in my trash. And now after seeing this video and realizing that they're going to landfills, they're being shipped, and really these things are never disappearing, I no longer use plastic bottles. So that's kind of the power of finding this information. The third thing that we found was a little bit more fun. So a few weeks after this, we finished this project. We had all these tags, these geolocating tags, in our lab at MIT. And a couple weeks after, we had a burglary. So someone broke into the lab. They stole a bunch of things. But interestingly, one of the things they stole was the geolocating tags. So we decided to watch these tags and sort of track them over the following days. And here's the thief. He's taking photos of what he's stolen. And here, this is even funnier, he's wearing a polo shirt with his address, the address of his business. The next thing that's going to be changing is mobility. This was alluded to earlier. But this is really a big focus of our lab, is looking at how human mobility can be changing in the next decades. This is a visualization of that same thing. This is a project that we're doing in Manhattan right now, in New York, looking at taxis. And given the incredible amount of data that we can gather from taxis, where people are picking up, where they're dropping off, how long their route is, how much they're paying, you can really start to look at the system in a critical way. So we started to visualize this, kind of take the data, and we're calling it HubCab. And basically the thrust of this project is to think how we can make the system more efficient, how we could actually share taxis. Bit of a video here. So we actually ended up quantifying this data, and we kind of analyzed what we found. And it turns out that we could actually improve the efficiency of the taxi system by up to 40%, which means 40% less emissions, 40% fewer cabs on the street, and 40% less of a footprint in New York. On top of that, we could also redesign bigger cabs so that sharing could happen even more easily. So in this case, public and private transportation could become almost the same thing. It would be kind of an on-demand but shared transit system. So all of this is on the scale of the city. I'm going to show you briefly what could happen on the scale of the car itself. This is a project we developed in partnership with Audi, and we were looking at kind of the driver themselves and how their psychological state is changed throughout the ride.
We just finished the drive. It was incredibly stressful. It was the most stressful drive I've ever been on. Nevertheless, I think we have a lot of great content to measure road frustration, because I'm certainly frustrated at this point.
Stop the car.
So we were just sideswiped, and right now my stress level should be through the roof. We got the information, we'll have to process the data and see where it's really at.
So what do you get when you combine intelligence on the scale of the city and intelligence embedded within the car? You could actually have self-driving cars. So this image shows a self-driving car and the sort of real-time three-dimensional model that it would be building as it was driving. And this seems a bit futuristic, but it's actually now a possibility. This has an incredible potential to transform our cities, and actually we're looking now at building these cars. So there's several universities that are working on building self-driving cars. There's several companies that are doing the same. And in Singapore, we're actually working on a project to have them kind of rolled out across the city. What could it mean for the city? Well, for one, it would be a city without traffic lights. It would be a city where accidents are uncommon, if not completely zero. I'll show you an analysis that we did of what a traffic
control scheme specifically designed for autonomous vehicles. By utilizing much more of the intersection at any given time than traffic signals and stop signs, the AIM reservation protocol has the potential to dramatically reduce congestion and therefore fuel usage, by eliminating the need for a lot of deceleration and
So basically it's making the city not only more efficient, but also more enjoyable for the people living in it. Energy, of course, is a big topic that's going to be changing our cities. And one of the big users of energy today is buildings. Today we waste a lot of energy heating buildings when there's no one in them. We waste a lot of energy cooling buildings. These things happen when not only are we heating and cooling the entire building when a user is only in one room, but we are keeping a home warm when occupants are at work. We're keeping the office cool when everyone goes home. So we asked ourselves what could be the dynamic relationship between occupancy and energy consumption, and how could we make our buildings more efficient. This was the study, and it shows this dramatic difference between occupancy and heat. So new technologies such as Nest are adaptively learning to occupants' behaviors, and you can set your patterns, you can set your desired rates and ranges, and the Nest will actually take care of heating and cooling your home. Something we're working on at MIT is local warming. We want to develop personal climates, and this is a project we put in front of, this is the front step of MIT, where lenses will actually detect where people are and put the heat where the people are. So you would actually be followed by kind of a bubble of personal heating. And what's exciting about this is that you could sort of choose your own temperature. It could become a social thing if you pass heat from one person to another. But really the most important dimension of this is that it could radically improve the efficiency of our buildings. In terms of architecture, we're seeing responsive buildings as well. This is an example of the lens. In architecture, we're seeing responsive buildings in public places. I'm going to show you a digital pavilion that we designed for the Zaragoza World Expo. And because of Zaragoza's history, the theme of the expo was water. So the mayor approached us and he said, how can we use water in a different way through technology? So our first idea was to imagine a pipe with digitally controlled taps. So here you see the pipe stretching overhead, and the taps would actually kind of create these cuts in a water curtain. The mayor was really interested, so he asked us to design the pavilion. And I'll show you a video now of the digital water pavilion that we built at the expo. As you can see, the walls are made of water, and you can project images, you can project text, and as a visitor approaches the wall, it actually opens up to let them in. So this building actually has kind of a fluid character in many ways. The program is inside, so it has info and traffic. There's a very thin layer of water on the top. You can sort of immerse in the top and be almost immersed in that pool. The building can lower and reduce splashing if there's a lot of wind. And even at night, the building itself can close, becoming just a pool. One of the most interesting things about this, obviously it's controlled by computer, and one night the computer went wrong and it started doing its own thing. Here's a guy, he came here and stood, he was coming from the airport, he had his bag, and he stood in front of this pavilion for about 15 minutes just watching it, kind of, you know, why is this computer going apeshit? And it was kind of doing whatever it wanted. And what was interesting is that hundreds of kids from the surrounding town came to play in the pavilion. And it became the most exciting night of the entire exhibition because we didn't know, the computer wasn't responding to people anymore. It was kind of creating water in whatever way it wanted. And so kids started jumping through the pavilion. They were kind of engaging with it in this whole new way. I'm going to talk to you next about the end of disciplines, which is the idea that the way we work can be transformed by these technologies as well. So this is what knowledge used to look like. It's kind of the central repository. It's the library that holds everything that humanity knows. And today, if you wanted to draw a map of knowledge, it would look a lot more like this. This shows all the scientific papers that are published. It's about 800,000 and the connections between them. And what's interesting is that they're all kind of interconnected. And whereas before, the most important papers were written by one person in one field, today, the most important papers are written by many people across many fields. This is called group theory. It was an article published in Nature, and kind of talking about how the new groups are emerging and they're completely different than what has existed in the past. This is how we work at the lab. It's a collaborative environment. It's kind of bringing people from all different fields and creating new knowledge through that juxtaposition. Universities will be affected as well. The old university, the model of a physical education is changing, and universities from MIT to Harvard to Yale are looking at what online learning could be. One of the final ones is that factories are moving back into the city, with production happening in the home thanks to 3D printing. Before, factories were centralized. They were outside the city, and kind of production was separated from human life. Now there's this third industrial revolution where in our homes we can print not only paper but also objects. And we're doing this in our lab. We're creating things and prototypes with 3D printers and laser cutters. This is a product that we're working on in the studio. It's kind of table that can be transformed. And we built all these pieces kind of with in-house production. And this points towards new ways of working. Back in the 1930s, Le Corbusier articulated his theory that, that human life should be split into categories and kept very distinct, where work was in one, leisure was in another, living was in another. Then came Jane Jacobs, who was introduced earlier, who said everything should kind of be juxtaposed, put on top of one another. She championed the neighborhood as this kind of aggregate of human life and where all things were coming together. We posit that technology can take this one step further. Technology mediates between private and public space, and it could recombine the structure of our buildings and cities. This is happening on MIT campus. Here you see MIT. And what we decided to look at was Wi-Fi. MIT was one of the first universities that became an entirely Wi-Fi zone. And this is really transforming the way students are working. Whereas before, students would work in these labs at computers, kind of closed off and singular, and now students are able to work outside, able to work together, able to work wherever they want. So we used that system, the Wi-Fi itself, to monitor how students were using it. Here you see all the Wi-Fi nodes, and we can actually track the usage in each one, so we're seeing where students are working at what time and what they're doing. Here you can see they're broken up during times of day and where the highest levels of usage are. And you begin to see these patterns that emerge throughout the week as well, with kind of peaks from 9 to 5 and then students working a bit at night. Interestingly, students, the work kind of drops off Friday afternoon through the weekend, and then Sunday afternoon it picks up again when students realize, oh, I didn't finish the paper that's due tomorrow. And so we're putting this through sort of very rigorous analysis. And what's very interesting is that MIT was originally designed with its function split. There was areas for recreation, there was areas for living, there was areas for eating, and areas for work. And what we're seeing today through analyzing the Wi-Fi is that these boundaries are blurring. Students are really using all spaces for all purposes. So we ask ourselves, how can this change the way we plan cities? This is a project we're doing in Mexico that's looking at how traditional public squares can become sort of digitally infused spaces, and they can actually be spaces for work. And I want to end with this final project, which is in the sort of main square of Milan. And what we did was look at how a cafe can also be a shop, can also be a place for working. This is a store that now brings people from surrounding businesses for business meetings. It brings people who are just looking for good food, and it becomes a very beautiful space. So the takeaway that we're kind of pushing towards is you could think of this as a lot about technology, but really it's not. It's at the center of all the things that we're doing and all the questions we're asking is people. So it's almost a paradox. When technology is everywhere, it allows us to focus on what makes us human. Those things that have always made us human, social spaces, good quality environment, and the way we share with one another. And that's kind of the focus of what we're talking about today with My Place, My Brand, is how those places can become more human and more real. Thank you.